So, my name is Myrtle Barrow. I live in England. I am married. I have 4 children. I do a lot of I work for charities. I am on the committee for breast cancer now. So I do fundraising every year for breast cancer. I am on the committee for Save the Children. I do fundraising for Save the Children because Save the Children work all over the world, 106 countries over the world, and wherever you have vulnerable children, things happening, crisis, we are always there. So we are in Yemen, we're in Syria, we're in Somalia, wherever children need help. So that's what I spend most of my time doing. I am also involved with Outward Bound. Outward Bound is perhaps a little known charity. It's Prince Philip is the patron. And Outward Bound also work with vulnerable children, but within the community in England. They go to schools where children, inner city schools, where children are failing in education, and they need help. They take them out of inner city and take them to other places, take them to outside into centers in Lake District, places where they can be challenged. So when they come back to school, they have a totally different focus, and these children usually excel educationally when they return from these trips. We work to help them to go to these centers so that to enable them to get this kind of experience. So that's what I do normally. In addition to that, I like traveling, meeting people. I'm a very open, friendly person, so I meet people all over the world. So that's my kind of background. I was trained as a teacher, so when it comes to education, for me, everybody should have access to education. So Save the Children and Outward Bound really resonated with me because I have 4 kids and every child is my child. That's how I see it. Now, when we all heard about coronavirus, we just thought it was something that was happening in China initially, and nobody thought in a million years that we would be where we are today. In February, I went skiing in Austria, and it didn't even cross my mind. In March, on the 9th of March, I went to Marbella because we had some legal things to do out there. And then people were getting very nervous. Here back in England, people were talking about it, but there was not this emphasis that we needed to do anything in particular. It was just talked about. And we all knew it was spreading in Italy. We were hearing about the stories in Italy. I came back on the 14th, but when we went to Spain, people were already social distancing. We were social distancing because we wouldn't even shake our lawyer's hand. We wanted to social distance because we were all getting very nervous. Because after the situation in Italy, we were all very concerned about what was happening. And even then, before we left, people were saying that in England, we should be closing down, but our government was saying everything was okay. All we need to do was social distance and wash our hands. So we believed what we were told. And then we came back on the 14th of March, and Spain was closing down the following day. So we were perhaps I got out on the 8 o'clock flight, being British Airways flight on that evening, and the other people who didn't get on those flights on that evening were locked down in Spain because Spain closed the airport on the 15th. And then we came home and we all got nervous because then we realized this wasn't only something that was happening in China or perhaps in Italy, it was everywhere. And for the first time, we all got very, very nervous and very, very concerned because now we were all told that it was our elderly relatives or parents or whoever who was going to be most at risk, and people over 70, overweight. My husband is 74, and he was placed on a vulnerable list. And our children, who I have grown-up children, my youngest got twins, 22. One was living in London, she moved back home. The other one was in Paris, she moved back home. So suddenly all our kids moved back home because where they were living in small flats in London with no space or whatever, we live on the outskirts, they all wanted to come home. Because if they all had to work from home, which was going to be by then, within the next 10 days or so, England, we went on lockdown as well. So we were behind all the other European countries that went on lockdown. And even then, people were saying England the borders were still open and people were still coming in. And there was no checks, no temperature, nobody was wearing masks. Everybody was still coming in up until the end of March when we went into lockdown. And suddenly, we were all thrown into lockdown and nobody knew what to do. This is something totally, totally different. No, this has never happened before. And everybody looked to the government for leadership. And to be honest, yes, in England, we made lots of mistakes in terms of the fact that we kept our borders open for another 2 weeks that allowed the spread. And we were being warned by France and Germany and Spain and Italy that we were going to be the worst ones. And in fact, we've had more deaths than all the other European countries. And it could be the fact that we closed down later, or it could be the fact that England is such UK is so international. I mean, we are the center of finance and everything. It's so international that people are traveling. We are truly global. And people are traveling all the time. Now, people are blaming our government, saying, they cause over 40,000 deaths and whatever. In my opinion, I think we are also responsible. We have personal responsibility. We were learning about the virus the same time as the government and as everybody else, because all the information from the World Health Organization was coming out. Nobody knew exactly what the worst case scenario was, what the situation was. People were just learning as they go along. And I think, we have personal responsibility. In my home, our children, I have not touched or cuddled any of my children since lockdown. We're living in the same house. They are so careful because they were being told at the beginning of this virus that they had to protect their parents and that young people were not as affected in the same way. Their risk was lower. And so our children, if they go out now that we've had lockdown, they go out, they meet their friends in the park or something outside. They're still worried about going in a restaurant, so they'll meet their friends in the park. Every time they go out, they come home, they isolate. So they're wearing masks indoors. My husband is saying, we live in the same house. If we have it, you're going to have it. and they say, we can't be too careful. And that for me is so sad, because I can't even cuddle my own children. I know they say we can be in our little bubble, and within your bubble, you can be normal in your bubble. Our children don't believe this little bubble. They just think that we have to protect our parents at all costs. So if we don't cuddle or we don't expose them in any way, then they're gonna be fine. I mean, it came close to home when my husband's business partner, he was just 2 days before lockdown, he was in the office on the Thursday, having a meeting with his business partner on Thursday. On Friday, the lockdown. On Sunday, his business partner started having symptoms. He was taken to hospital on Sunday. He was in hospital for 5 weeks, and then on a ventilator. And then they had to give him a tracheotomy, and then he died 2 weeks later. He was from India. They have big families. They were only allowed 10 people at the funeral. And so they had to organize Zoom for all the relatives and friends to see the funeral. I mean, he had 2 children, a wife. He was fit, he was healthy. We were told that people who had underlying issues were most likely to get coronavirus. He was vegan, he was healthy, he had no underlying issues. So then, all the things you start questioning, all the bits of information that you'll be given when you see something like that happen. So we were just very, very nervous and really super, super careful. You wash your hands so many times in the day, even when you haven't done anything, you're washing your hands. Because you are in this mindset that washing your hands is the best way to protect yourself. I mean, in the UK, I don't know about anywhere else, you couldn't get toilet rolls. No toilet rolls were in the supermarket. You couldn't get hand sanitizers. No canned stuff like tuna, baked beans, and all those things, anything in can, went on ration. You could only get 1 or 2 tins of baked bean. UHT milk, you could only get 2, because all these things were rationed, because everybody was so afraid that the supermarket was going to run out of food. The supermarket stayed open, but all the shops were closed. And so everybody ended up at home. Some people, I was one of the lucky ones. I consider myself lucky because I live on the outskirts of London. I have lots of space. I have a big garden, so I could spend, and luckily for us, we had beautiful weather for about 14 weeks. So we could spend our time outside in the garden. And for the first time, we learned to appreciate the small things in life. Like, I wasn't going to the hairdressers. I wasn't having my nails done. I didn't have any time pressures. I cancelled 3 weddings, 6 holidays during that time for various things. And I wasn't bothered about it. The fact that I wasn't going out to dinner didn't really bother me, because I was thankful I had my life. I was thankful that my family and my friends were safe. And suddenly, walking around in my garden, looking at my flowers, was the highlight of my day, and I was happy to do that. And for me, yes, coronavirus has more or less quarantined us and shut everything down, and nobody in a million years would have thought that the whole world, basically, would have been in this situation. But my daughter, one of my daughters, she did climate change management and finance, so I call her my eco-warrior. And so everything is about green, about climate change, and about carbon footprint and everything like that. Well, London was closed down. London was empty. I have never ever seen London like that. It was sad, but also interesting to behold, because you could see London, not the crowd of tourists and people everywhere. I used to say London doesn't sleep, because whether you were there 8 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning coming home from an event or dinner or whatever, London was always busy. During shutdown, nobody was in London. You could actually see the architecture, you could appreciate it. London was totally empty. A friend of mine actually went into London and took photographs of all the really beautiful buildings and self-published a book of London. During the coronavirus pandemic, he pulled it and just self-published it. Because that's something we probably will never see again. In terms of my charities, breast cancer campaign, they had to furlough 65% of their staff. They had to, all our balls we had to cancel. Even though it was in October, we were due to have them in October, but we just felt that we could not, in all honesty, ask people to donate auction prices or ask them to pay £350 for a ticket to go to a ball when we have over 40,000 people who have been killed and lots of others in hospital and people recovering. We just felt it would be in poor taste to go ahead with that event, even though it's an event to help people. But we just felt we couldn't go and ask people for contributions in any way, because we had to think of the wider picture, what was happening now. And we have been having Zoom calls, trying to do something online, because with everybody at home, online seemed to be the only way to communicate. Or reach people. So we've been trying to be creative, looking at various ways to fundraise, and knowing that we are not going to raise anything near what we used to raise. Where we were looking at, last year, we did over £300,000 on the night. We are now looking at doing a fundraising sort of dinner at home type thing on Zoom, where we're asking household to contribute to make a donation of £30. And that's expecting a household to put on a little dinner party with their family and just contribute £30. We are not, and we know we are not asking people to contribute a lot, because we know people have been struggling. So many people have lost their jobs. I mean, everybody's nervous now. I mean, we were very lucky that our government introduced the furlough scheme, and people were paid 80% of their salary, and so lots of people were furloughed. In our company, we employed over 280 people, and because only companies that were considered necessary, and that is companies that support like the NHS or emergency services, etc., who were working. Everybody else were closed down. And we had to furlough over 2/3 of our people as well. And now, people are just about going back, thinking, but people are now afraid to go into the office. We have friends who had places in the city, and they are really, really struggling financially now. Nobody knows what to do. And going forward, nobody knows what's going to happen. And that there's so much uncertainty. We are in a situation of limbo. And even though I can honestly say this time in lockdown has given us time to reset, time to think about our priorities. We have to reevaluate what we considered important. Because suddenly all the things that we were on this treadmill, running, they're not important anymore. And we realize we don't need to do those things. They were nice to do, yes, but it's giving us time, family time to spend with our nearest and dearest. I can honestly say my husband was going to work all the time. I hardly ever see him. Now, he's been at home, working from home, having his meetings, his international meetings. He was traveling all the time, plus running a company in England, because he's on the board of the European organization where they travel all over the world and all over Europe. He's in Brazil, China, India, wherever, all the time. He's not been away since. He's been at home. And you know what? I understand that, but my kids never really saw him growing up. They love having their dad at home. It is the best thing for them. They are so happy that he is around, and he is now spending quality time. He's lucky the older ones are grown up, but the twins are 22, and he is spending quality time with them, really engaging with them, and they are engaging with him, and they love it. They love the fact that dad's there. They love to have conversations. They love to talk about business with dad because he has so much experience. And that is all good. But then when we look on the flip side of that, where people are afraid to go to work, my daughter, she works in London and they're open. People are going back slowly now, but they have to social distance. So she has to call. She works from home. Every day she's on the computer talking to people. She's a consultant for an energy company, and she does projects. She's talking to people all over the world, various projects. But she sits in front of a computer from 8 o'clock in the morning. And when she's doing a project that is in LA, she was doing like 17 hours a day. She was sitting in front of a computer, just getting up to have something to eat or to go to the bathroom. That was life. She was on that project for about 6 weeks. That was her life. Just sitting in front of a computer, 12 to 17 hours a day. I mean, that's not healthy. But that's the reality. And it is a new way. My husband, on the flip side, he loves working with Zoom. He said, I don't need to be traveling, going everywhere like I used to. We spend a fortune in hotels and this and that. We don't need to be doing that. He said, my company is now more efficient because people can't hide. I can ask, if I ask them to do something today, I'd say, I want it by tomorrow, and it has to be done. People can't waste time anymore. People are accountable. And so he has discovered a new way to work, a new way to get things done. And if this is going to be our reality, we all have to get used to the new way things are done. I mean, personally, in terms of life going forward, we went to a restaurant the first time on Friday night because things are slowly opening. Our government has an initiative called Eat Out to help out. So if you go to a restaurant Monday to Thursday, if you spend £50, you get a discount of £25 because the government pay £25. They're trying to revive the hospitality industry because they were totally closed, and of course lots of jobs are on the line, people are furloughed, and the government want to kickstart the economy. But there is that fine balance between kickstarting the economy and putting people at risk. And people are afraid. Now they're trying to tell people to go back to work because it's safe. But so many people are afraid to go back. They don't want to go back to work. People have they have gotten used to working from home, spending time with their family, and suddenly, this is the reality. And it is very different. I try to keep in touch with, we have lots of Zoom meetings for my charity, and we keep in touch that way. And I try to make telephone calls to my elderly relative or a friend of mine who's from Spain, but she's in England and can't go back at the moment. Try to just ring to see that she's okay. And that's what we do now. And that's what we consider normal now. No, so we are in a new normal. And this morning, our government is saying, I listened to the news, and the chief medical officer is saying they don't expect realistically a vaccine until 2021. So coronavirus is going to be around for quite some time. So we are going to have to get used to living with it. I mean, now like I said, I couldn't go to Spain because anybody coming from Spain has to quarantine for 14 days. Now, our government is looking at the R number. So the R number governs everything we do now. England is 0.9 to 1.1, and we see spikes in Germany, in Spain, in France. Austria has just been put on our quarantine list. Croatia has just been put on our quarantine list. So our world is becoming smaller and smaller. And it is just a reality. People are rushing to go to Portugal because they've just been taken off the quarantine list. Some people, I call it cabin fever. They're having cabin fever because they've been stuck in their homes for over 3 months, 4 months, not being able to do anything. And they desperately go outside, they desperately want to go on holiday. But how can we even think about traveling now when we don't even know when this virus is going to spike in another country? Austria was one of the best countries during lockdown because they locked down very early and they had very few deaths, very few cases. Germany, of course, was on that list as well, where they locked down early, had very, very good management. But yet we're seeing spikes. So we're all very, very nervous now. And I think everybody's nervous. Now it's the young people. Initially, they told the young people they were not at risk. Now, the young people have this idea that they're invincible. So they don't take it seriously, a lot of them. We're having situations in England where they are actually going to close rave parties down in Manchester because young people are they're so fed up with coronavirus and the lockdown that they are organizing big parties, which are illegal, by the way, and the police have to go and find these parties and lock them down. And simply because initially they thought that young people were not at risk, which we now know, they're now finding out that even if people are asymptomatic, the disease can cause lots of problems that will manifest itself later. And all these things are really frightening. Every day I wake up, I am really worried about what's going to happen next. And I am particularly worried for my children because they still have life in front of them. They are just starting out. One of my daughters, she has just gotten a job, the first job, because she was in education. They've both just completed their masters, and she's just gotten her first job, and she has to move an hour and a half from home to find this to work. And we went to look at a house for her, and we are looking at places thinking, is it safe? How many people is going to be in the house? Because we don't know how people live or whether they're going to be socializing, whether they're going to be responsible. All these are now things we have to think about. And it is very, very difficult to reconcile with all these things. In addition, we are worried as charities, we are worried about what's going to happen because even though people are put on furlough and you can put your staff on furlough, when you're not earning any money, when you're not bringing anything in, the government is not supporting the charities. So they have lost their income. There's still a need for their function. And we don't know what's going to happen going forward. So there is this great unknown out there that is very, very challenging for everybody. And that's where we're at. And we just have to find the best way through it. We have to be creative. We have to be strong. And we have to follow the guidance that we're given and move forward. People have to go back to work because if the government furlough scheme is designed to end in October, then we're going to have lots of redundancies. If people don't go back to work, I don't know what's going to happen to the economy because the way we live now cannot continue indefinitely. And until we find a vaccine, which is what we're all sitting waiting for, I don't know what's going to happen. So that's my coronavirus story.